I feel like it swings it from like actual unfavored to favored. I felt like this matchup was like one of the harder ones, but the more I played it, the more I felt like it was actually just Charizard favored. I think that's kind of controversial. I think the heat tackle with Charmander is in general really good. It feels like two very different worlds when you have it. As we saw, like there was a ton of the best American players were playing Giratina, Lostina. That would be how I would play it.
Since Tord just won the largest internationals with Charizard, today I got him to teach us everything he knows about Charizard, from decklist to matchups and much more. Hope you enjoy. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Charizard deck list. So we can start by talking about your list and sort of your inclusions. Some of the cards are in the deck and why you think either that's better than other cards and sort of what's more considerable to change. So I think the first thing I want to ask you about is sort of Prime Catcher's the A spec. There's been a lot of discussion between, Prime Catcher, Max Belt, and Hero's Cape as the three possible A specs. What do you think about Prime Catcher?
Yes. So the Prime Catcher, I think, is the most neutrally strong A spec into like most situations and most matchups I found. I mean, it is a Ghost, right? And that's what basically the power effect you already play the most of in your deck, right? Like you have the Counter Catcher and the bosses, and if you don't play the Prime Catcher, you will play like triple boss, right? So if you play the Maxim Belt, you kind of open up one of the tool slots again, right? You don't have to play the Defiance Band if you have the Maxim Belt, but you don't really get the spot back anyway, because you have to then spend the spot on that extra ghost effect, like the extra boss's order or Counter Catcher anyway. So like those slots are kind of committed regardless. I found the Prime Catcher to just be like an overall nice boost into everything. It has less spikes than what the Hero Cape and the Maxim Belt have, of course, right? But the goal with the deck list was to just make all the cards basically neutrally strong again, so that they could be flexible into basically any matchup you play against. For the most part, at least. You can still argue like Choice Belt and Defiance Band will be useless from time to time, but most decks have targets for those as well. Like especially Defiance Band. Of course, most decks take prices, so will usually be activated. The Hero Cape is interesting. I mean, it just won the last regional, right? Yeah. With Pedro Petrucci, so that's also very interesting. The Hero Cape seems like the strongest A-spec if you're not playing the mirror matches. But it seems like the weakest of the three in mirror match, again, as it doesn't give you any immediate value, and if your opponent, gets their vacuum to stick around, then it doesn't really do that much. I guess like it would be better if you pair it with Airy as well, though, and like someone managed to snipe their vacuum or bait it out somehow. Then, getting to stick the Hero Cape afterwards can be amazing, of course. But otherwise, I think you'd rather just have immediate value. You want that immediate Prime Catcher value or immediate Maxim Belt value as well, like for the mirror match especially. So that's a reasoning behind the A-spec. And of course, right, like I committed quite heavy to beating up on the control matchup, as that is, Charizard's normally weakest point, and the Prime Catcher is an extra switch, right? And Hero Cape and Maxim Belt is more or less useless into those matchups. You can argue the Maxim Belt into the Chi-Yu is nice as well, but otherwise it's, you want the Prime Catcher. Like that's the strongest one there.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with all that. So the next thing is, before I sort of get you to run down a few of the less important takes, is the Barbarrow line. I have a friend, Brent Tonniston, has a very strong opinion the Barbarrow line is not worth it. I think, it's like at first glance, it looks like it's for Devolution mostly, and then it has like a ton of other applications. One of them I think the most is Guardy, but I'm sure. Why do you think the Barbarrow line was worth playing and is worth playing or not?
Oh, that's interesting, actually, because I felt the Bibro line is almost a must include. I play this deck quite a bit with and without, and it feels like two very different worlds when you have it. Like you can just make such a strong board state with the Bibrel. As I mentioned, like in some interviews from stream before, you are a combo deck, right? You need two pieces, or sometimes even more, right? But Candy Charizard is usually what you're looking for. And if you don't have any of those pieces, it's really good to use Bibarel to draw a couple cards. And there's so many outs to like either one of them, right? You can draw the Candy, you can draw the Arven, you can draw the Ultra Ball, you can draw the Charizard EX, right? You can draw the Force Seal Stone. So many things you can draw as like piece of the combo, and then you pitch it for the other one, and then boom, you have your Charizard EX ready to go. And you need to do it continuously as well. And of course, as I said, like it's great against TM Devo as well. As if your pitcher does get devolved, you still have a consistency engine in the Bibarel to lean on afterwards again. Most decks are also trying to kill your pitcher very aggressively, and you're very disincentivized to get 2 pitcher DX in play immediately too, as you can only use one anyway, right? And that's also pretty bad into Devo, of course, to set up 2 pitcher DX. So it seems just better to like have something you can set up in in addition to pitch it, and not only lean on pitch it the entire game. And like it's just too many decks that can go counter catcher plus hand disruption KO, right? And then you're kind of out fishing for the rest of the game. So like the Bibarel seems like a must-have almost.
Yeah, fair enough. The next things we want to talk about is some of the cards you are including that weren't included before, and some people are cutting. So these are like Jirachi, like the boss CC. I mean, that's become pretty standard now. The control text as well. If you can just run down these or anything else you think is fairly important to go over.
Yeah. So this deck is obviously fairly teched out against control and against Lost Zone again, right? Again, because I thought that would be some of the decks I thought the stronger players would gravitate towards, right? And it probably still is. As we saw, like there was a ton of the best American players were playing, Giratina, Lostina in different variants even, right? So, and I think their Archie is a difference maker if you're up against any deck with a Sableye. Like, I feel like it swings it from like actual unfavored to favored. Like, it makes that much of a difference. So that's why I choose to include it. Of course, if you don't run into any of these, like Liam's run, for example, like in Orlando, he didn't hit any Sableye whatsoever. So there, of course, he got maximum payout out of cutting it and adding the Chameleon again. But if you're running into Sableye, it seems like, they always have that, late game Sableye, Roxanne, KO Bibarel thing with Sableye that kind of mess you up. So, and of course, you are in danger of running into multiple Sableyes or Sableye early game into Greninja, or Sableye is just a very, very insane card that you kind of want to block. And the Yelcher, honestly, I don't feel like it's only against control. Like, especially when you're playing the mirror matches as well, they tend to be quite grindy. So getting back, the bosses especially into that matchup, or even Gardevoir as well. Also, if it's like a matchup you want to boss, a lot. So in these matchups, it's really good to have a way to cycle those. Of course, you could just play the Palpad over the Yelcher, right? But it's more snipeable by the control matchups. So if you're committing to one of these like slower cards anyway, you might as well commit to the slowest one and, be a little bit safer into the control matchup, but still having, the flexibility of using extra supporters into like these spam Turo/boss matchups as well.
Okay. I don't think there's much else going on your list specifically. I think we can move on to the cards that you're not including, that I think a lot of people I think is really good. Mist Energy, we just saw in Patusi's deck, he did have Mist Energy. What do you think about Mist Energy?
So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you're running the Hero Cape as your ace spec, right? Because then your goal is to try to make this unbeatable Charizard EX, right? At some point. Like, 430 HP. The only way you really take that thing out is Roaring Moon or Tina VSTAR, right? Like where you get to cheat the HP barrier and just say insta-KO. But Mist Energy obviously blocks that. So, of course, that makes a lot of sense there. That's like its own little mini combo. Of course, it's good against, Roaring Moon and the Tina VSTAR in general. But I found like against Tina especially, the turn, like the Charizard you have with the Mist, they will just use Iron Leaves on anyway. It doesn't make too much of a difference there. I'll just save their V-Star for like the next one regardless. So that one is like kind of whatever. Of course it can make a difference, but didn't seem too impactful. So like it's that. I guess like it's kind of good against, Buffalant if you're worried about control again, right? Like one of those options there.
Yeah, it's okay.
It seemed like it is an extra energy for Radiant Sarge. It's a little bit helpful there. Extra energy to retreat into Clefairy. It has some other uses, but seemed a little bit too narrow for me. It of course obviously protects against TM Devo, which is like one of the biggest reasons to also play it, right? But yeah. I think I'd much rather have the second Chameleon over the Mist Energy, as it's searchable with the ball cards, with Super Rod, and like in general more useful to like be able to stream your Charizard, especially if you're committing to double Turo as well. Then double Chameleon is pretty amazing because then it's less pressure on your rare candies throughout the game as well. So
fair enough. And so you talked about the second Charmeleon. The next thing I have is, Devolution Airy. I think that there's sort of two paths you can go down, which everyone's either going down your version or Devolution Airy. What do you think about Devolution Airy?
I mean, I think Devolution Airy is really strong. In theory, it's like borderline broken, right? And there's some matchup the Airy is just really good against on its own as well. Like if you're up against, Lost Box or Chien Pao, they have some items that are really crucial for the deck to function, like Mirage Gates and Superior Retrieval. And if you get to snipe one or two of those, then the game kind of ends, like on the spot almost. So that can be very good. I was very between Airy and Roxanne. But I found Roxanne to still have more utility. They're both trying to do sort of the same thing, right? Like you're trying to mess up a really big hand. That's usually when you want to play the Airy, when your opponent has a lot of cards in hand. There's still no guarantee that the Airy actually hits what you want to hit, or that like discarding the items actually makes the difference you want it to make, right? I feel like you kind of have to commit relatively hard into it if you want to go the disruption way. It's just like a slight hint of disruption didn't feel that impactful. But if you have like pretty heavy disruption and can use like multiple areas or multiple TMDOs, right, then it definitely makes a difference. I feel like most people can kind of, scramble their way through one area. We see Chien Pao already adapted playing Silene, right, to get their superiors back. So I don't think it's, as impactful unless you really commit. And I didn't want to do that again. As I am really happy with the flexibility of the cards that are already in the list. Okay,
and do you think going forward? I mean, it definitely something like a Devolution Airy gives you a big advantage in the mirror. Do you think it's worth it to go in that direction, especially since your list becomes so popular? It doesn't have missed energy. Most of the time, it only has one Charmeleon, or that's more in question now. What do you think about that going forward as well?
I mean, it's still good, but I'm still more on the side where I kind of want to be defensive against it and play it myself again. So I feel like if you have the second Chameleon, you'd probably still be pretty okay into that, like the heavy Devo Airy spam thing. Because every time they use Team Devo, you give up a turn, right? Like even if you loop with Regieleki, which we'll probably talk about soon, you're still giving up a turn. So it's in the end, it's still a tempo matchup, right? Like you can't give up too many turns to disrupt the opponent either. Like at some point you need to start swinging back, right? Or else the game will end again. And if you give your opponent too many turns, they can also use multiple bosses on your pitch it and take over the game that way, right? So it's definitely a very tricky matchup to play, right? But it's I feel like Team Devo and Airy is really strong into players that either don't expect it or kind of forget about it, right? Or forced into situations sometimes where they can be locked out of the game because of it again. So
yeah, and I think that's perfect to transition into Regieleki. You told me before we just started this that you were definitely considering Regieleki for EUIC. I think it's important to just go over first why it could be in the deck, and then also important to talk about why you didn't play it. So I mean, I did work very heavily on making a Regieleki list before EUIC. But yeah, I'll give it to you to talk about Regieleki in general.
It was actually funny. I forgot the card existed for a little while. I honestly thought it was rotated, the first couple of weeks in testing. And then I saw this Japanese control Charizard list that incorporated
crazy.
it. Yeah, and a bunch of one-off techs that could be looped with the Regieleki again. I was like, that's pretty genius. Definitely onto something there, I think. That list was very heavily leaning into the control route, though, of course. But the concept was very cool. I liked it. And after some testing, I figured out that the Regieleki absolutely demolished the straight Snorlax variant, because you can simply just loop your Turo and Prime Catcher endless.
Very different experience to us. We spent hours and hours working out how to play the matchup. It's just this. They would always go for Chi-Yu, and it became so difficult. But yeah, go ahead.
That's fair. Yeah, no, you can just loop the Turos and the Prime Catcher over and over. So that felt really strong, and you just always made sure you had two switching effects in hand, right? If you have both the Turo and the Prime Catcher, you can use the Prime Catcher to get your Charizard into the active attack. Whatever your opponent does, you just Turo whatever target, go back into Lecky, bring back the Turo, and at some point you will have establish both the turn and the prime catcher back in hand, and you can do the same thing again, right? And if many opponent gives you basically endless time to do this, it's completely fine, right? So felt relatively checkmate there, but I realized that I think the stronger control players would probably play Pitch It, and then natural inclusion there is Luxray, and Luxray hard counters the Regieleki again. So that kind of put me a little bit off the whole Regieleki idea, knowing that, okay, I can beat up, probably the most popular control variant, but towards the later end of the tournament, there's always these really strong control players left, which was actually the case at the UIC too. So then I was more happy with, choosing the Yelcher over the Regieleki gang. I started with Palpad actually though, and then I realized that Yelcher that's actually just Palpad but Airy proof. So let's do the swap to that one instead. That was like my whole thought process of Regieleki. But of course, I think Regieleki is really strong, but you need to kind of commit more into it than just slamming it in here for it to be like giving it the full potential, right? You need like the area you can loop, you need the Team Devo you can loop, and so on, like the other variants we have seen running around.
Yeah, I think before we move on from Regieleki, I will speak to it a little bit. So there's we found a lot has changed in the Charizard mirror since even EYC and since it's discovered. We've been Aggro specifically has been working on it a lot. And eventually, basically what we found out is if you Airy on turn 2 and you have like a lot of ways to like run them out of energies, and like you're basically holding devolution until Airy is like actually fully bricked them. A lot of strategies like this. I think personally it does make it extremely favored in the mirror against an unprepared mirror, but it just depends how far you actually want to go into that. But yeah, I think that's all I have for the deck list. It's time to move on to the matchup guide, and the first thing we'll talk about is what you're going first and second into. So I think that the first question to ask here is what are you going blind?
So I'm blind. I'm going second with this deck for sure every time. I was actually under the impression that I wanted to go second into every single matchup, but I even Chien Pao. My Chien Pao understanding haven't changed. I still want second in that one. I think that's kind of controversial. But everything else I want to go second against except the Arceus matchup. Arceus seems to put on a lot of pressure if you let him go first and let them have that turn to VSTAR for Judge and smack you. Because you don't get to take advantage of your turn 1 explosive, hand setup turn, where you go like either Cleffa or Rotom to amass a bunch of cards and then, go into Candy Pitch at next turn. So, even if it's a little bit more sketchy, it's sketchy going second anyway. So, going first and hoping you find a couple basic outs and hoping to get some sort of evolution down seems to be the way to go into the Arceus matchup again.
There's a few there that I want to ask you about. So, there's Lugia, which I actually agree with you, but I think it's probably a more controversial one as well.
Yeah, Lugia is not a very consistent deck at the moment. It lost a lot of consistency. I want to clarify a little bit on going second as well, just percentage wise. If you're going first, you kind of need to have the Puffin for that to be successful, into most things. Having the Puffin when you have 4 copies, 8 cards, it's only about 40% to hit one. Most other combination of cards doesn't really give you a strong enough start. So I prefer to go second. So you also allow yourself to open Ultra Ball or Arven as well to give yourself very strong starts, or even the Luminion directly. Because if your hand is complete nothing, but you have an Ultra Ball, right? That means you can go Luminion for Arven, for Forest, for Puffin, for full bench, right? The Ultra Ball converts directly into full bench. So that's really great. And also, if you open Arven, naturally, of course, you can turn that into Puffin and do something with that as well. Hopefully, you have one more natural basic or something in hand, so you have a decent start. So it's just way more starts that work out if you do go second. And a lot of your starts, if you don't, you're just straight passing. You didn't really get to develop any board or do much of anything. So
yeah, your perspective is pretty interesting because with the Regieleki, you were actually opting first all the time, mainly because we're going for turn 2 Airy, especially in Zard mirrors. Because if your opponent Rotoms with that deck and then you Airy, and this is true for any Airy version of Charizard, where if they Rotom or they Cleffa and you Airy them, that's the best turn of the game to Airy. So you're not even worried about even attacking on turn 2. area them instead. So
Interesting as well. You probably tested the mirror more than me at this point, because I've been on the beach the last 2 weeks. I
not me
can.
specifically. I'm being fed info, but yeah.
I'll believe you for sure.
That's what we're doing in that matchup. So, I mean, maybe from the other side, you are supposed to go first as well. But, I mean, that's definitely up for debate. Definitely very close. All right. I think that's time to move into the matchup guide. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Charizard EX. So, definitely need to start with what a sort of 60 mirror looks like without any of these techs. What does your prize map look like? You have any tips for this matchup? Take the floor.
So go second as per usual here. Will be my tip. Same argument logic that gives you a much higher chance of getting more things down. When I'm playing against William Acevedo, he actually was under pressure to go first. I think like whenever he got to choose, he went first. I think he went first all 3 games we played, which was funny. Yeah, you're just like a little bit safer. But of course, if you do open Puffin, it's better. But the main thing I have for the mirror is try to target your opponent's engine. So I like to go after, if you're playing, say, my 60 mirror, right? You start with knocking out the Bibarel first, and then you go after the Pitchit EX afterwards again. Like you just try to get rid of their engine as fast as you can, basically. But the mirror is very difficult to play, so it's not always as clean cut as that, right? It depends on resources on both sides. What do you have access to? How much you want to, prioritize your own board development over, disrupting your opponents again, right? It's a whole balance there. But as an overall goal, I like to target engines. And I think Turo is a pretty good swing card as well. You can get rid of liabilities in play, like Rotom and Luminion, the 2 pricers. And you can also heal your Charizard EX going back and forth. If you're just swinging into each other. Obviously, this also depends a little bit on their version, right? If they are very disruption heavy, then spending super rods and energies and candies on the Turo play might not actually be the best play every time. And the best play might actually be to, give your opponent those prizes earlier and force a faster game instead of a more grindy game. Because the more grindy game, you're probably more likely to lose again if your opponent is already targeting down your resources, right? So it depends heavily on which kind of variant you're up against. Those are what aspect they have, right? If they have Maxim Belt or Hero Cape, of course you want to keep your vacuum around as well. Well, if they play Prime Catcher, you don't really care that much about the vacuum. You can kick the Collapse with the vacuum. That's nice, but like in overall, it doesn't have that much value as you would have against the A-spec tools again.
Yeah, I think I had Grant on this last format, and he was saying basically what you're supposed to do is go 1 prize and then avoid killing Rotom too early to go to 3 and just sort of go kill 1 again and then kill 2 after that. I think still is true most of the time because Max Belt is probably becoming even more rare than it was, but
yeah. Like, depending on their tools, right? Like, Maxim Belt, then I like to go 1 and then 3. That's the best price map again, if they have Maxim Belt, because it keeps you Pitchit alive as long as possible. If you rush down to 2 immediately, then your Pitchit dies, a turn or 2 too fast again. You don't want that. So then I like to go to 3, because your Charizard EX is still out of range from the Maxim Belt, so that's cool. If they play the Defiance ban again, then I would actually flip the price trade and go from 6 to 4 and then down to maybe 2 again, right? That will also keep your Pitchit alive as long as possible. Because if you go to 3 there, then they will use the Defiance ban to kill it again, right? So like my price map would probably be with priority of keeping my bird alive. That would be how I would play it.
Whatever keeps the bird alive. All right, and then moving from that, how do you sort of deal with an airy Devo deck, because it's definitely becoming very popular now?
So I think, as you said, like my list can definitely struggle a little bit against that. You would need to play like you're really on point to like keep up with them. But the easiest way is probably to do like the second Chameleon, like Liam did. I think this getting the Arceus is pretty scary, but you can definitely do it if you just want a better mirror match and like being a little bit safer into that. I still like haven't had crazy problems with like the double Chameleon variant, but of course you could run into problems there too. But 2 Chameleon just seems very solid for any airy TM Devo shenanigans they do against you. And otherwise, if you don't do that, or even if you do that, like your main plan is just trying to camp a Chameleon on the bench again And if they knock it out, try to roll it and put it down immediately again. So ideally, you want to Charizard EX inactive, Charmeleon on the bench, and a Charmander. And try to not, if you ever have to evolve the Charmeleon, then try to not attack with it. Try to attack with another Charizard again, so they don't get damage onto the one with Charmeleon underneath it. If they do, you can turret and put it back down again. That would be like the counterplay to that. But of course, all of this is much easier if you have a second copy of the Charmeleon, and then just lean more on the Bibarel than the Pidgeot again. Like less need of the candies, right?
Yeah, I think it also depends on what resources you end up with so much as well. It obviously becomes very difficult. If you're running out of energies, then the barrel sometimes isn't as good. Depends what happens.
That's true. I mean, if you do the double tour and the Yelcher, then it's not really issue getting it stranded most times, it feels like.
Well, it's mostly just all time. But from a Regieleki, I'm sorry Regieleki pulled at this point, but
yeah, because you were Regieleki pulled, it probably tested that matchup to death with Regieleki.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot about that matchup, not so. But yeah, I mean. But I can see, obviously, Bibarel is definitely very important. Yeah, I think if you don't have anything else to say about Charizard, we can move on to Chien Pao. So I think Chien Pao matchup has become very interesting as well. There's lots of things they can do, trying to play around your Defiance belt. You don't have the Max belt. And then I mean, it becomes, very interesting. I just want to ask you your perspective, if they're just trying to go for 2 prizes, what's your way to disrupt? And then how do you play the early game normally as well? Do you have any tips from there, that angle?
Yeah, so you definitely prioritize setup here. As far as the early game, now that, the Prime Catcher is starting to be a more commonly used aspect, the Chien Pao player is getting braver and start putting Chien Pao in the active immediately, right? Before, they would probably be a little bit more scared to do it, right? As they are scared of your Maxim belt, and then it's much harder for them to actually answer your first Charizard, as they haven't been able to use the Chien Pao immediately to grab the water energies out of the deck, right? Maybe only get 1 proc of Shivery Chill to get that big KO. And that's pretty hard again. But now if they're a little bit more brave now, then of course they can reach the knockout easier. But it's just like a race, right? Chien Pao tries to take 2 prizes each turn. You can do it with Hans, Greninja, or Chien Pao. The main Pokemon I've been liking to snipe has actually been the Bibarel line. I've seen some Chien Pao players actually go to 3/3 Bibarel, which honestly, that seems really good. If they have the triple Bibarel, I would probably target the Excalibur more instead. But it seems easier to stream the Excalibur thanks to the Bibarel than to stream the Bibarel. Excalibur isn't really good at helping Bibarel get back into play, right? But Bibarel is really good at helping Excalibur get back. So I've just been targeting the Bibarel. At least if they're playing the standard 2/2 line, then I would, target the Bibarel aggressively each turn, I think. Of course, if they only have the 1 back, so you obviously KO that, right? Or if you ever, catch them discarding any combo piece like a Excalibur or Candy randomly off a Superior or Ultra Ball, of course you take advantage and start hunting the Excaliburs instead, right? But otherwise, I usually like to target the Bibarel first. Depends on what they do, right? As you said, if they refuse to take the first prize, you don't get the Defiance Band KO on the Chien Pao either, right? So it depends a lot on how they play. But general strategy here, I would say just KO the Bibs and Hand Disruption has been my go-to.
I've also heard people saying they're going for tackle in this matchup as a Chien Pao player just to avoid this whole Defiance Band thing, but on the Frigid. But I mean, it doesn't really change much for your strategy. It's just more things they can do to try to stay ahead, not give up the first 2 prizes, because that's the core thing that matters in this matchup. So doing whatever you can for that, and then you do have more disruption options.
It seems like that as well. First one to get the first 2 prize knockout. It's like that in a lot of matchups, though, with Charizard, to be fair.
Yeah.
You just want to be that 2 prizes ahead, the first 2 prize KO. And then Charizard is really good at racing, right? The more prizes taken, the better it is. So it's pretty brutal that way. Hard to catch up again on the prize trade from Charizard.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that's it for the Chien Pao matchup. Let's go to Giratina Losso. Now, one of the most interesting things I think in this matchup is basically how you play the early game. And I think that I think the late game is a lot easier. So we saw on stream against Isaiah Bradner, you went for an early heat tackle. I've heard a lot of different things, hitting them for 180, taking prizes on comfies to play into Radzard a little bit more. What's your perspective on this matchup?
So I think this matchup is really cool, actually. This one is also a little bit harder to flowchart as well, I think, because it depends a lot on, resources, setup, what they have access to, and all that. But I think the heat tackle with Charmander is in general really good early game. As you kind of want to deny your opponent that 2-price knockout as well. But of course, it's punishable as well, right? Depending on how your opponent plays, like what they get access to. If you go heat tackle, maybe they play switch card, right? And boom, that's punish. Or if they go just evolve into cram attack and take the 1-price, you still can't snipe the Tina VSTAR, right? Like because it's out of range. You're doing 240 now plus the 30, still out of range there. So it depends a lot. But maybe they have 2 Tinas in play, and then they have to evolve both of them. If you give them that 1-price with the cram. So there's a lot on the version. Like when I played against Desire, for example, he didn't have the water energy, so I never had to bench the Manaphy. That was also like a little bit of a blessing. I think most people play without the Bandit as well, I guess. But Bandit can also be like a huge part of the matchup if they do run it, right? It can be like some item lock shenanigans that you want to try to play around. But I guess like most people have gone away from that right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I haven't done the research myself. I'll quickly look it up while you're talking, but yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, it depends quite a lot, but it's very similar here. You want to have the first 2 prices if possible, while you try to deny your opponent the same thing. So if you just go guns blazing with Charizard EX immediately, and your opponent just answers with okay, initiate trade, like Iron Leaves, Tina VSTAR, Iron Leaves, right? Like you lost the trade there, right? But Charizard has the advantage of hand disruption and the Radiant Shard single price board state at the end of the game, which is really good as well. So, and also if you have both the tool cards, right? You have both the Choice Belt and the Defiance Band. They have 2 ways for Radiant Charizard to hit the Tina VSTAR as well. And Tina doesn't have a great attacker into Radiant Shard. Like they can kill it with a 2-pricer or Greninja, but it's relatively expensive to take this knockout again. So what I feel like most games kind of devolve into is this, single price board state after they kill your Pidgeot and the first Charizard, you just promote the Radiant Shard and attack, and then like they're having some issues from there again. Like kind of force the boss or similar from them as they're kind of scrambling there. Like you leave them with a 2-card hand and a single pricer in the active. Say if everything goes well, of course, right? And then they need to figure out the way to win from there again. The early game is definitely big though, like depending on whoever that one favors. Mm-hmm. From their side, they should probably try to target down the Pidgeot though, which also makes Bibro like really strong for that matchup too, giving it that Radiant Sarge, board state at the end.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's super complicated at the end of the day.
For sure.
I don't really have much else for that. But the next matchup is Future Iron Hands. This matchup is very favored in general and can be straightforward in some games, but also you get some pretty awkward. I've had some pretty awkward situations where they're also like similarly to Chien Pao, not benching Iron Crowns and just going Miraidon to Iron Hands.
Yes.
So you can get into that.
So their ideal plan is just going Miraidon, take a KO, charge the hands, you KO back, and then since you don't have the Maxim Belt, you don't have any way to knock out the hands, and if they don't put down the Iron Crowns either, right, then they get to basically punch you a time for free, set up the 3-price turn, and then they have game on you 1 turn before you with a gust effect on the next one again. There's a lot of things that can go wrong for them as well, though, like in the process here. That's what makes the Charizard deck favored into it, I feel like. So what I usually been doing is I just use Arven for Defiance Band plus a Gust Effect or Candy, and then just knock out the Iron Hands immediately after their first Miraidon attack. It's like surprisingly, realistic to pull off this as well, especially if you're going second and got like either a Rotom or a Cleffa pop-off turn to set you up for this. And then like you're in the lead and can continue pushing from there. Bibro is really good in this matchup. You don't really want to put down the Pidgeot as that is a 3-price liability, kind of like the Luminion again. But I will set up the Pidgeot if I already have that initial lead, right? Like if I'm up like the 2 attacks or the 1 attack and they can't really catch up, I don't really care. I'll put the Pidgeot down if I have it. But otherwise, I will just lean more on the Bibarel and try to chain together attacks from there. The Radiant Shard also becomes really good in this matchup as it's something you can just bench, and then at some point in the game you can just smack an energy on it and take the final KO. as like all these guys are pretty squishy, right? So I've seen a lot of future ends also adding Iron Leaves as well to give themselves a one-shot option into Charizard, but it doesn't feel like it changes too much. Like it speeds up the game a little bit, but like it doesn't feel like it plays too much into the win condition. It's basically very similar to them just gusting and killing something on the bench, right? Price trade-wise. The difference is that like they force you to find another Charizard, I guess, right? It's like the main thing using the Iron Leaves there. But like they don't get the additional prices they want from it. So it's very similar.
Yeah. Exactly. I don't think we have too much more to say about this matchup. Generally ends up being relatively straightforward in most games. Next matchup, Arceus. A few ways to play Arceus. There's like the handlock deck, and there's also the Tina, obviously the main one. You talked a little bit about it going second. Yeah, I mean there's Arm Reach as well, but I think we can skip over that one. Yeah, what do you think about the Arceus match? Specifically Octina, I think that's the main one.
Yeah. Well, it's funny though, like Armor Rouge was actually one of the decks I was struggling the most in testing against.
We were considering it.
The power level of that deck is just so high, right? But it's kind of clunky. So
it's very inconsistent, yes.
But it's cool. As I mentioned like a little bit earlier, I think that I was under the impression that you wanted to go second against everything, but this is probably the exception, as the turn 2 Judge attack from Arceus is really strong and like denies your pop-off turn with Cleffa or Rotom again. So I think I've settled on going first into this matchup now. Even though it's like a little bit sketchy, it's sketchy to be judged as well. So like give yourself that little bit of extra leeway to get any sort of evolutions down, like a Bibarel, a Pidgeot, like a Shard, anything is good to be able to like evolve into. I think on the second turn before the judge happens. So and if you high roll, right? And you can fully set up before your opponent does anything, and then obviously you're in a great position to just win. So the judge from Arceus is definitely pretty scary because if they go first and they do the judge, then they might get that 2 free attacks lead, and then it can be hard to catch up from there. But in general, you're trading pretty fine in this matchup. I feel like they have Iron Leaves and they have a Maxim Belt for the Tina, but you don't really have to do much to take the knockouts either. Heat Tackle also very good in this matchup as well, like setting up the 30. If they ever miss any evolutions on their bench, as well as they're setting up, you can also target the Vs before they become V-Stars. And you can do that as early as the first knockout as well, right? So they take a single price knockout, and if not everything on the board is evolved, you can chase a 2-pricer. So and put your head in that 2-2 price trade, like most games and most matchups delve into. So
yeah, I mean, I think the main thing in this matchup is just take 2 prizes at all costs. Some of them are switching to Prime Catcher, which makes it a little bit easier, as Iron Leaves is the only one shot, and then because they're trying to I think Iron Leaves at the end of the game, I'll be honest, not probably enough experience in this matchup, but they're trying Iron Leaves later when everything's dying, and trying to keep their Tinas alive.
Maybe like the final punch KO, I guess, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. So if they are running Prime Catcher, it does seem a lot easier. Although Prime Catcher is somewhat scary as well. Judge Prime Catcher. But
That's true. That could mess you up a little bit early game if you do go first and try to set up a Bibarel or something, right? So
yeah, yeah. Or if you're carry a Pidgeot, like literally anything, yeah.
Just set up the Pidgeot DX directly, right? Easy. That's other with the Bibarel.
Yeah, I hope for the best. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably all to say for this matchup. Next matchup is Lugia. Pretty interesting matchup. I think that the thing I find most interesting is the early game in this one as well. And I mean, honestly, the whole game, but it does become a little bit easier past a certain point. You're just killing what's in the active. But yeah, what I find in this matchup, I'll talk about. I think that you basically almost, in my experience, you kind of don't really want to punch the Lugia V, and you kind of just want to set up your board behind it, is sort of what I've found. And just try to draw cards in the early game so you can actually set up, get your Rotom off the board if that's what you have, or Clef or whatever. But how do you find this matchup to be? Do you agree, or how do you think it plays out?
Yeah, I think I agree with this. I also found that the early Charizard here is kind of scary. It depends on the board state, of course. Like if you can attack, more or less for free without being very scared, right? Mm-hmm. Say knocking out only Mencino in play, or they have not much going on, then of course it's fine. But otherwise, I like to play it defensive. Just try to set up a good board state behind, wait for them to take the first single price KO, and then depending on how they set up their board, you punish by KOing, the correct target. So like a good Lugia player has to auto-commit a lot of energies into the Mincino/Cincino immediately, because if they don't, you can just hunt their Arceus again and like win relatively easy from there. So a good Lugia player, again, like will commit those energies to Mincino right away, and then you'll have to try to run them out of energies that way instead. This is like a very funny matchup for the hero cape, I think, as well.
Yeah.
As
Absolutely.
you can always hunt the Arceus and always be out of range on the second Cincino, or like the first Cincino, like in early game. But the Prime Catch is, of course, obviously very good as well, because it plays directly into your plan of, killing Cincino or Arceus straight off the bench again. So, but I felt like this matchup was like one of the harder ones, but the more I played it, the more I felt like it was actually just Charizard favored.
Yeah.
I think Liam said it was also like a really favored matchup as well. I hit like 6 Lugas or something. I was like really happy with that, he said. So it seems relatively fine. Just hunt down the Cincinos and like put pressure on them that way. Or if they do ever, mess up and get a little bit greedy on their second turn, you just kill the Arceus and the game could end relatively fast there too.
Yeah, it's also sometimes, if they evolve to a Cinccino, you can run them out of Cincinos. You kill their first Cinccino, you can run them out of Cincinos sometimes. It's something I found as well.
Yeah, exactly. So either go for the birds or the Cincino, but don't like overlap them. Like you have to fully commit to one of them if you go for one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sometimes you're like killing one Arceus, then killing Cincinos after, but I mean, it's like...
Yeah, that's like fine as well, yeah.
It really does depend, I think, but... Yeah, I mean, that's the core strategy in general. I've found the same thing. In the beginning, it's really scary, and then, like, you play it a bit, and we didn't have Collapse in our deck for a really long time, and then once we put Collapsed in, you're getting Rotom off the board, and then you get these, like, pretty good end games where, there's only Lugia left, and you can just start Turozing stuff to...
Yeah, exactly. Like, the Turo late game, I think, is also very good as well. Like, because you will probably be behind a little bit, because they will Glass Cannon the price trade in the early game, but then as soon as you stabilized and got rid of their one shots in one way or other, then the Turos become like unstoppable after. So
yeah, exactly. I fully agree. All right, Gardevoir EX. This is the matchup. This is the next matchup. At very first glance, I think everyone's like, oh yeah, you just like vacuum their stuff. And then like you get into it a little bit more and like your Pidgeot dies and then you're like trying to find all your stuff and it gets really annoying. What are your basically tips for this matchup? I mean, I think in my opinion, a lot of the time it just comes down to take prizes where you can. They have the Mimikyu as well, which can be difficult to get around and deal with. But yeah, how do you feel about this matchup?
It depends a little bit on the list, right? I've seen some take out like Team Devo even for the Charizard matchup.
Yeah.
But like the Mimikyu is usually what they resort to in a lot of cases, just because the deck is pretty slow now. Like the engine is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
So Mimikyu will be in the active a lot. So that means you will have to gust a lot, right? We'll have to use Boss and Prime Catcher. Prime Catcher is amazing in this matchup. Like probably the best ace spec for this one. Maybe arguably Hero Cape, but definitely not Maximum Belt. Yeah. So like the biggest swing turn you can do is obviously the Vacuum plus Boss turn. That nets you 3 prizes. If you ever pull that turn off, you usually just win. It's like too big, but they will of course try to deny it by sniping your Pidgeot like immediately as soon as you got the prize, right? That's their goal again. This is a matchup that becomes a lot easier if you have the Bibarel as well, as like they have relatively easy access to just insta KO your Pidgeot. So with a single prize reef, and then it can be hard without the Pidgeot to pull off that Boss plus Vacuum turn, right? But if you have the Bibarel, is a lot more reasonable, especially if you have the Prime Catcher, right? Like you have one of the pieces plus a Vacuum or an Ultra Ball for Luminia, like you can do it, right? So this is also like a strong advocate for the Bibarel line in this matchup. But you do gust a lot. I really like the Yell Chair for this matchup as well, as you can bring back the bosses, because you might have to gust 5 times or so, right? So yeah. And like if you have the Elcher, you can do it. It's like no issue whatsoever. Like if they hide behind the Mimikyu all game and try to do that alternative win condition of just having this immortal Mimikyu and knocking out your Charmanders and whatnot. That's like the main thing there. Sometimes you can set up a second Pidgeot even, but a lot of the time you don't. Like, and the main thing, of course, is the same as before. When you play against Gardevoir, always target down the Gardevoir line whenever you have the option to. So if you're wondering what to KO, if you can KO Curlia or Gardevoir, do it, right? Like, or rolls. Like, there's never anything else. Never get baited by thinking that you need to KO an attacker or like anything that's not the Gardevoir line. That's the what you want to knock out for sure.
Yeah, you can have super niche cases where killing Drifloon just gets it out of play altogether, but I mean, almost never happens, especially with a list like yours.
Yeah, it's pretty niche. Knocking out their attacker is the better play.
Yeah.
I've seen situations where, like, say they go Bravery Charm on the Drifloon, right? Knock out the Pidgeot.
Yep.
If you leave that thing alone, even if you have the vacuum, if you just like ignore it, like all their energies are stuck on this thing that doesn't knock out the Charizard right now. That can be pretty cool as well. And if as long as you don't put that on a 2-pricer, you could like force them to take that single price turn or even like just hit into your Charizard, which is terrible for them, right? So like that's also something you can try to take advantage of. So like you don't necessarily have to insta vacuum that thing, right? Like you could leave it alone for a turn as well.
Yeah, I think the initial assumption from Gardevoir players was they're favored in this matchup because I think they are favored against non-Barrel, but I do think the Barrel actually makes a massive difference.
No, I think so. Like at least in this one, that the Barrel is very huge. Yeah. Like otherwise, like kill Pidgeot, destroy their hand. It's like, okay, if that's fair, like you probably get there, right? But
yeah, we were definitely scared of it. All right, next matchup is Roaring Moon. There's 2 Roaring Moon versions right now. There's Ancient and Dunsparce. I think both of them are just try and kill where you can. But what do you think about this matchup?
So honestly, I felt like the Dunsparce Moon and Moon EX is like relatively close as a matchup because they have like really cool ways to manipulate their board. So like some of the times, or a lot of the times actually, they will get the first knockout, right? And then in theory, if they just draw well from there, then they can use a 2-pricer when you use a 2-pricer and a 1-pricer when you use a 1-pricer, right? So and then it's just about whoever got the price lead will win in the end, right? And the Dunsparce is a pretty strong engine. It's relatively hard to disrupt it. Obviously you can, right? But they draw well and play well there, like leave them in play, then it can be pretty good. I think in general you want to target down the Dunsparce line instead of the Moon though, whenever you can. Like to mess with their engine again. But you only have so many, item gust effects as well, so it depends a little bit there. But ideally, you just want to force them to use Roaring Moon to hit into a Charizard at some point, and then you can Turo to, get the turn back and be ahead again. But it feels like, as most people's consensus is that Charizard is favored in this matchup, and I think that's still pretty true. Like they definitely have to work way harder than the Charizard player, like to keep up in the game again. Charizard literally just puts down a couple of Charizards, and then they need to like jump through hoops to stay alive and pull off combos every turn.
And I mean, the Ancient is sort of it's fairly similar, except they don't have as good of a draw engine, but they are actually can one-shot with the 1-pricer, which is a big deal, and to even kill Pidgeot with that. What do you think?
Yes, it is. I think that one is also pretty cool. They are a little bit slower to get going in the first place, and they're also like a little bit more suspect to the hand disruption, it seems like, as well. But it's also a pretty close matchup, I think. It's usually always just like a 1-turn difference in it as well. But your game plan as the Charizard player is relatively streamlined. It's just disrupt them as much as possible and try to keep liabilities off your board, right? Like get rid of, the low hit point things. And towards the end of the game, when you see that even Pidgeot might be in range, you might want to get rid of the Pidgeot as well to deny that one-shot turn on the Pidgeot too. And there might be a spot in the game where you could say you're like both a 2-2, right? Maybe you can force the single price turn with the Radiant Charizard, where you go Bibarel, Chameleon, Radiant Charizard. There's also like a very cool trick you can do against almost any matchup. Like on the 2-2 scenario where like you might normally lose the boss if one has the boss and the full combo, but you just get rid of all your liabilities instead with Terran collapsed in. And you have, a sort of checkmate there. Like if they knock out active, you have Bibarel to get the Charizard EX, knock out Chameleon, still a Radiant Shard, knock out Bibarel, still a Radiant Shard. So hard to deal with that board again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you covered everything for that. Oh, yeah, one more thing I think everyone needs to know is it is, important to still vacuum their capsule even if it doesn't require a knockout. Because sometimes it's like one, they end up being one off. But that's like a small thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. That definitely comes up quite a bit. Like oftentimes you need to use the vacuum on the first one.
Yeah.
depending on if they took a prize or not, though, of course, right? But sometimes maybe like you will actually have the first knockout and they haven't taken any yet, and then like they're tanking with their tool again, and then the vacuum becomes pretty important. But I think in those situations you actually want to delay the vacuum as long as possible as well, because that messes with their mat and discard pile. It messes with their like dark patches, sawdust, like especially early game, those energies can be hard to find like additional copies of as well. So like you can go for like a bigger combo turn later again, where you do go for the vacuum. But like it always depends, right? Like you of course go for the vacuum instead of hitting into it again, right? If you have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I one more thing is, do you ever find yourself retreating to Rotom on turn 1 in this matchup?
But yeah, actually done that a couple times just to deny that first initial KO. Because if you get the leader, that's actually quite a big deal. So I do like that play. It's good to mention as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can move on from that to control. I think, there's obviously 2 versions here. Pidgeotix, I think they're both probably equally hard to play, but Pidgeotix is more common, but we can start with Blocklax. What are you sort of doing as your version of Charizard EX into Blocklax?
So against like the straight Blocklax, I'm actually just charging the Radiant Shard, like putting all the energies in deck on the Radiant Shard. And the price map is as follow. It's Prime Catcher on the Rotom for 2, and then it's Turo, Yelcher for both Turos, and then you take the last 4 that way. So you put 2 prizes on the Prime Catcher and then you put 4 on the Turos. If the opponent decides to get rid of the Rotom immediately, so you don't have that line available, then you obviously just start with Iona before you start spamming your Turos, and then hope that, like, because they don't have Rotom in play, that they will eventually run out of the gust effects again. Or you can try to keep your board state small so that at some point maybe you only have the Radiant Shard in play even. So depends a little bit on what they do, but as long as like every card is in there, it seemed relatively stable to just do the Prime Catcher into Quad Terra for that one. Of course, depends on their list. Some of them play, League Headquarter, and some play Crushing Hammer. That definitely makes things a little bit more challenging. Regardless, though, you set up the pitch of EX anyway, so you have control over, what you're doing. You can also use Charizard EX to like extract energies onto the Radiant Shard as well. Doesn't really matter too much. I actually found the Charizard EX to be a good bait to put down in the matchup, because their best play is probably to put the pitch of EX in active each turn. So that you have to turn the pitch it to move. And then that kind of limits your search options as well, right? But I found for some reason most people don't do that. They just, they take your other guys that doesn't have free retreat. And then you just turn them, and that's great. But they should be putting the Pidgeot in active at least. And for the control variant, or like the Pidgeot variant, this is where the Turo seemed, or like the Yelcher seemed like a better inclusion over the Regieleki again, as the Regieleki is hard countered by the Luxray. You pick up a card and discard a card. Doesn't do anything. Eventually, your Regieleki dies. Or actually, eventually, you get something else stuck in the active. That's usually what happens. They counter catch around the Lecky, and then you can't keep retreating into the Lecky at some point. And then you lose the value that way. So I guess that's like the big one. And in this matchup, you just want to use Boss and Turo a lot. Usually Boss. Boss is what you want to use the most over Turo usually, because they're usually not that Snorlax heavy in the Pidgeot control variant. So here as well, I also like to go after engines. A lot of the time I will target on the Pidgeot EX actually, or just boss it twice. Ideally, I kill the Pidgey before they evolve, but if they evolve first, which I often do, then like spending 2 bosses to kill the Pidgeot EX is still a pretty good play. They're usually pretty thin on candies, like 2, maybe 3, like not a lot of them. So like targeting down the Pidgeot EX can be a very good play.
And in this one, not going for the Radzard, going more for
In this one, you don't have resources to go for the Radiant Shard, because they will knock you out back again at some point. So you can't really afford that. So here you have to use Charizard EX instead, which is only 2 energy instead of 5, and all the excess energies you can use to retreat your Pokemon around instead, as you will actually be allowed to retreat, because this deck isn't that Snorlax heavy, or they will at least have Pokemon in play that you can boss, and then you get to manual retreat again. So here you for sure want to attack with the Charizard EX instead, and keep all those other fire energies around for, mobility instead.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think I have any more questions about that. That makes a lot of sense. And from brief experience playing the matchup, it seems relatively straightforward with your kind of list as well. You still have, even with Charizard EX, it's not like you're completely blocked off Rotom and stuff with the Choice Belt, Luxray. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a big interaction as well, like trying to get rid of the Luxray with the Choice Belt as soon as possible as well, or the Rotom with the Choice Belt. Choice Belt is really good in that matchup. I'm going to be a little bit worried of the Hero Cape, though, because if you do spend a Vacuum to get rid of the Luxray or the Rotom immediately, then they do have access to the Hero Cape again, which is a little bit annoying for sure. But it's still not like lose on the spot or anything. Like, it protects one Pokemon relatively well. And keep in mind that they could put the Hero Cape on the Pidgeot whenever you try to two-shot it. So then it's really nice to have the Hero Cape, or like the Vacuum still, so that you can still, do the two-shot there and not, you're never spending 3 balls and killing the Pidgeot. That's one too many. That's too much.
Yeah. Okay. The final matchup that we have, we're not going to go into the Dialgas or Spalthras of the world, but we will go into Lost. We'll go into Lost Zone Box. I think the issue that we had with this matchup is we kind of didn't have any idea what the Lost Zone decks were going to play going into EUIC. But now we sort of have this better idea with the Pedro list. I'm sure you're familiar.
Yep.
So do you have, at first glance, it's like an attack Iona, hope for the best matchup. But do you have any tricks as well? Do you think, they have like this counterplay with the Muex and stuff? How are you treating this matchup?
So I think this one is very close for sure. I think if Lost Box draws perfect, it wins. But it beats like basically anything if it draws perfect. Yeah. But it does suffer quite a bit from hand disruption, and you can do that a lot against them. So, like percentage-wise, I'm not sure if they're actually that likely to hit, combo after combo every turn. Like, what usually happens is that they do miss a beat at some point, and then you can try to capitalize on that again, right? Like, you don't need too much from them. You just need one missed beat most of the time, and then go from there again. Like, if they want to one-shot you, they still need to use a two-pricer. So it's hard for them to really up-trade as well, especially if you actually playing both Manaphy and Jirachi. Like, that's, of course, a huge difference maker here as well. If you run into Lost Box and you don't have Jirachi, you're really unfavored. So this is definitely a Jirachi matchup. And trying to not be too greedy with the extra slot there for something else again. But hand disruption is great. If they ever have a two-pricer on the board, you should probably target that whenever you have the option to. Just take as many prizes as you can each turn. Their one-shot options is usually Roaring Moon. I've seen sometimes Iron Leaves even. They can try to damage your pitcher to set up for hands as well. That could be a play. Like, it all depends how they're teched out, right? Even seen some people with tools in their deck to take 3 prizes with Iron Hands into pitch it. Like, depends how hard they want to go into that one. They could play Team Devo, then you need to do the anti-Team Devo strat with the Chameleon on the bench again, right? Like, that's also good. In this matchup as well, I think the Radiant Charizard is really good as a thing, same as like against Tina, basically, where you can try to make that single prize board state at the end. But of course, it can be denied by, say, an Iron Bundle plus Iron Hands, and you get pushed to the bench and have to promote something, right? And then, like everything else that's not the Radiant Shard will be, in range for Iron Hands again. So I think it's like a very interesting one. Again, like hard to flowchart, but some, key things you can try to, follow, like hand disruption is a big one, right? Make sure that they have access to as few cards as possible. And if you really need to, screw up the price trade, you use the Radiant Shard at the end as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's objectively just about making it as difficult as possible. And Rad's Eye is a really good way to do that. So, because the Iron Hands needing 2 Mirage Gates, if you can put them in a situation where they need Iron Hands, it's really, really tough for them a lot of the time. Like, you're forcing them to find the hands, the double gate, probably rods as well, switching out, like, and the bundle maybe. Like, it's a lot of cards, right? Yeah, you're ironing them to 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and you start with like 3 cards in hand, like after the disruption and top deck. So it's quite a lot. Also, like you slightly mentioned it, but like the Mew EX is also like something you want to be aware of as well.
Yeah.
That's also why the Radiant Shard, when you're at like 2 in prices, is also really strong, because if you just go down to 1 with the Charizard EX inactive, they can simply just Mew EX and copy you for game. So that's also scary. So that's also like a good argument to try to pull off the Radiant Shard at the end of the game too.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, the Mew EX is so much easier, not only because it draws, but if they just use Roaring Moon, the Roaring Moon's to the discard, Mew EX is still in their deck, so.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Mew draws when they have like nothing in hand, so it kind of kicks them into their little combo, and then they need any energies as well. So like any energy in their hand will be able to be used there as well. So if you commit to the Airy in this matchup and the Irachi, you're very favored, I think. But like the Irachi alone, I feel like pushes it into, you know, slightly favored range, but it's still a very close matchup, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. I mean, I don't have it. If you don't have anything else for that matchup, I don't either. So, thank you so much. I think if you don't have anything else you want to say, like you want to shout yourself or anything.
I think that's fine. Covered most matchups and like a lot of important things. I was thinking about maybe doing a Metapha class on this in the future, so you can look out for that as well and try to go, you know, even more in depth if possible on some of these things. And yeah, I'll get to it though, like for the future again. But thanks so much for having me on. It was a lot of fun for sure.
Of course. Thank you so much, Tord. Hey, one last thing before you leave. If you end up getting coaching with Tord or get a class with him because of this video, I would really appreciate it if you let him know that you came from this video. It helps me justify doing cool things like this to really good players in future. So yeah, please do that. And thank you so much for watching.